Ever since I was little, people have always told me that superheroes don't always have to wear capes. But when I was little, I never really interpreted this for what it truly meant. I never thought that could possibly relate to my everyday life. But now that I'm older, I've been able to see some of the keen examples from my day-to-day life. And the one constant occupation that I keep drawing from this is nurses. Every single time I see one, they're constantly overworked, underpaid, and very underappreciated, which normally amounts to us always taking them for granted. But the issue is that we may not have the luxury of having these unseen heroes around forever. Hi, my name is Catherine Wang, and today I'm here to talk about how this deficit could cost you an arm and a leg. So a good place to begin is, what is the nursing deficit? Well, to put it simply, it's a shortage of nurses. Currently, America's healthcare system doesn't have nearly enough nurses to take care of the incoming amount of patients. To look at it from a numerical standpoint, according to the AANC, in 2012, American nursing colleges turned away upwards of 79,659 qualified applicants, just due to the fact that they didn't have sufficient funding, nearly enough classroom space, or nearly enough professors. The troubling thing is that in the last 6 years, we still haven't learned our lesson, because according to TCU's 2018 published report, they accepted about 120 applicants out of the nearly 582 that applied, which is absolutely atrocious to me, considering that translates to about a 20% acceptance rate. Another troubling thing about this deficit is that it's growing at an immensely fast-paced rate. In the last 12 months alone, nursing managers have reported a 53% increase in opening positions in their hospitals, and the deficit is predicted to grow by about 15% in the next 10 years, which translates to over 1 million unfulfilled jobs. All these numbers amount to the three things that this deficit could possibly cost you, the first of which being time. This is a really easy example because let's say right now I trip, break my ankle, and have to go to the emergency room. Well, I'd probably be there for hours on end, waiting for someone to run my films or for someone to fill out my paperwork. And this wouldn't be nearly as troubling, but people say that time is money, but this deficit could also cost you physical money as well. Because when hospitals don't have a sufficient amount of nurses, they often turn to this thing called traveling nurses, which come in for about 2 weeks at a time and cost way more than a nurse would on an annual salary, therefore causing your healthcare rates to go up. And the third and final consequence is the decrease in quality of your healthcare. This can range anywhere from a small incident to potentially costing someone their life. In the most severe instance, let's say you're inside of an operating room and the patient starts to bleed out. Well, if there's no one to get blood or no one to keep the calm in the room, then this could very quickly turn into a very sticky situation. So I believe that a great question to ask is why? Why is the deficit occurring? Well, circling back to the fact that universities aren't accepting nearly enough applicants, this is largely due to the fact that they don't have a sufficient amount of professors. You see, when you're hiring someone for a professorship job, you normally want someone that's really, really qualified. So oftentimes, you try to seek out anyone that's had a lot of time in the field. But when people are qualified to this extent, they often go towards jobs in clinical practice or become traveling nurses because it helps them control their time better and they can make a better salary. So by the time people look towards professorship, they're pretty old and it just becomes a vicious cycle of having to rehire nurses. One thing that I didn't realize before walking into this is the fact that states have regulations as to what nurses can and cannot do. And nursing is just like any other field. You can go to school for another 4 years, get your master's, or in this case your BSN, and you'll be more qualified for a better job to make a better salary. But when states such as Texas regulate what nurses can or cannot do, some of these job opportunities oftentimes tend to go away, which puts states like these more at risk. Now, I know a lot of you guys might be thinking, well, technology has done a lot for medicine in the past couple of decades. And while I do agree with you, I believe that we could never truly replace a human nurse. Not only on the patient care scale, but you have to think on the emotional level as well. According to Rebecca Grant, while she was gathering information for this article, her mother was rushed into the ICU with a sudden heart attack, and she said it was the scariest moment of her life. She said that she was filled with fear and anxiety. She said whether you're playing the role of the scared parent, the scared child, or the scared family member in general, the one thing you feel is fear, and it just kind of overtakes your entire body. She said after about 5 minutes, after feeling this paralyzing fear, a nurse came, sat her down, told her everything was going to be okay, and at the end of the 3 weeks, her family had managed to survive a tumultuous incident entirely unscathed. She said that nurse is now more like family to her than anything else. So the most obvious solution to this deficit is for more people to become nurses. But many people are often deterred from the field because they think that they make bad salaries and that they aren't appreciated nearly enough. And although I will agree with you that nurses oftentimes tend to get bad press, I believe that we should really set the record straight on this one because you have to remember that they are saving people's lives. And in fact, 83% of nurses that were interviewed said that they still feel job satisfaction regardless to what anyone says. They said that seeing the smile on a patient's face is worth more than any paycheck that could ever be placed into their hands. This was showcased in one of our very own nurses, Nurse Kim. She said, even though I did have to put myself through nursing school, it's still one of those things that I would do all over again. And in my opinion, this really speaks to me because it showcases how much she loves her job. And if you can love what you do, oftentimes you tend to put more effort into it. And it's not only on the emotional scale that we have to think about, because currently in the US, we're rising in depression rates, opioid addiction, and new epidemics are on the rise daily. So if we don't have a strong medical front against these issues, we're never going to be able to overcome them, and the world would become apocalyptically different. So in my opinion, the 3 ways to stop this deficit is to A, support it, B, to appreciate more nurses, and C, to consider career nursing. The first step is to just support the end of the deficit. Because not many people are aware of this deficit, which is why nobody's really thinking about it or trying to put a stop to it. You see, when it's on the bottom of the list, many people are underestimating how quickly it's growing, and they think that it has time when it truly doesn't. The second step is to appreciate. Appreciate any nurses you might know. Although many nurses enjoy their job, there's a small 17% of them that still feel like they don't get enough appreciation. And if you really think about it, one nurse quitting could cost the lives of thousands. And the last and final step is to consider. Consider a career in nursing. Although you might be thinking, well, I've never thought about that before, you have to remember that college is a time for experimentation. And who knows, if you get in, great. But if you don't, you have to remember that you could be opening up spots for more people, because if you really think about it, the more applications that go into colleges, the more likely they're going to see the growth, and they're going to try to throw more money into their programs, which will therefore put an end to the deficit. So my question to you is, are you going to let this deficit cost you an arm and a leg? Thank you.